Everybody's up here, already got the coffee and donuts going. It's a great place to be. So before I get going, I do want to introduce some folks here. One is my wife, Mindy, as we mentioned. She was my classmate at West Point. She was an AG, Adjutant General Officer, and spent a lot of time in and around Kabul in Afghanistan. My brother Eric was a year ahead of me at the academy. He started off as an infantry officer, then he got a cowboy hat and some spurs and became a cavalry officer, and spent a lot of time around Baghdad in 2005, 2006. My little brother Micah, who's 9 years behind me at the academy, 10 years behind his brother, and he is currently serving at Fort Carson as an infantry officer there. Started off at Fort Campbell in the 101st, and then spent, I encourage you to talk to him afterwards. He had a great time. Spent a couple years out in the Old Guard working funerals at Arlington, and then after that was on the presidential flag detail. So spent a lot of time at the White House, Mar-a-Lago, all the fun places, traveling around with the president's flag detail. And then my father's here, spent a lot of time traveling around, chasing his kids around, both at the academy and then worrying about them while we were Afghanistan and Iraq and Ranger School and all those fun things. So before I get started here, just my thought is, what I would like to do is kind of talk about just my story and my path. And my story and my path is not, it's not unique to kind of our generation of veterans. A lot of us have very similar stories, including some of the people in the room here. So I'll kind of talk about my path, my story, what it was like hearing about the fact that we're going to end up going to war, preparing for going to war in Afghanistan, some of the things we learned along the way. I do want to do a quick plug here for my business and the company that I work with. So I do leadership development consulting, and I recently started working with a great group of veterans, most of them from the special operations community. I can't claim that title, but most of them are from that special operations community with Fifth Principle LLC. We do leadership development, character building, team building. So I encourage you to go check out the website. It's fifthprinciple.net. And if anything, check out the bio. Some very amazing folks that we work with, and doing some great work with that team. If you have any questions, feel free to ask along the way. If not, we'll definitely have time for them at the end. So I entered West Point in the year 2000. In the year 2000, the biggest thing that we were going to do at the time, and the most excitement that we could hear of, was maybe we would go to Kosovo, maybe we would go to Bosnia, but that was it. And there was no outlook, no future thought of a war happening. So my sophomore year, one morning, my sophomore year, I was getting ready to go into my physics class, and the world changed. So planes hit the Twin Towers, as everyone knows, on September 11th in 2001. Then the Pentagon, and one crashed in a field in Pennsylvania, and no one knew what else was out there. And I'm sure everyone here can remember what it was like that day, knowing that happened and knowing that the world had changed. Now, I learned a big lesson that day, in that I went into my physics class. The instructor had the news on the TV. As soon as it was time to start class, he turned off the TV and said, "Let's get to work." And we did physics for the next hour. We didn't continue to watch the news. We didn't watch the towers fall. We had no idea what was going on because we had a job to do. And our job at that point was not to monitor the news. It wasn't to speculate about what was going on. It was physics. So I learned a very important lesson just minutes after the attacks happened on September 11th. And that was, we had a greater mission and a greater purpose, and we had a job to do at that time. So that's what the atmosphere was minutes after the planes hit the Twin Towers on September 11th. The days and weeks following, our lives changed as cadets at the academy. We went from an open campus that was a tourist destination in New York, and buses driving up and down the streets and people taking your picture all the time, to a closed campus. You would come onto the post, and your physics or chemistry or political science instructor was the one checking your ID and doing gate guard until they could get a permanent force. You'd be sitting in your class and look out the window down your hallway, and a team of soldiers would walk by carrying M4s, SAWs, 203 grenade launchers. The military academy's band was patrolling the woods around West Point. It was a very, very, very different time. The following weekend, my older brother Eric and I went down to New York, and there were soldiers that were guarding the Twin Towers at the time. So we showed our military ID, and we were able to walk up to as close as we could get to the Twin Towers at September 11th. And if the point had not been driven home, it was during that. The heat from the fires, the sights, the smells, the things you would hear were seared into our brains. And we knew at that point that we were no longer just young kids going to school and then going to go play Army anymore. Our lives had changed. That continued to be reinforced in the years that followed. My class, the class of 2004, was the first class that committed to staying in the military after the attacks on September 11th. We entered the Army, we entered West Point in 2000, a time of peace. And then the first day of classes, your junior year, is when you have a commitment. You can walk away at any point prior to the first day of classes your junior year and not owe a dime. First class, junior year, our class, almost all of us stayed. And we knew that we were committed to at least the next 7 years, and more than likely a lifetime of being involved with this. So my class, the class of 2004, made a big sacrifice and continue to make a big sacrifice to this day with that. And I remember starting a few months after September 11th, up until we graduated, on a regular basis, we would be having lunch. Before it was time for lunch, you would hear the announcement come over the intercom in the cadet mess hall and say, "Attention all cadets, a moment of silence for," and they would name the graduate who had recently been killed in Afghanistan and then subsequently Iraq. So that was the environment we grew up in, and that was where we were at the academy at that time. And what I think is interesting and unique about that is we were kind of at the epicenter of the Army's learning of what was going on there also. I took the first Homeland Security course that was offered at the academy right after the Department of Homeland Security was authorized. We took it. So we took this course while they were building it. So our reading and our lessons that we learned on Homeland Security came while the newspaper articles were coming out. I was able to take a terrorism course at the academy. And terrorism course at the academy changed a lot after September of 2001. And then finally, I was able to be in rooms and hear people who had just come back from the initial invasions into Afghanistan, or who had just come back from Iraq, and say, "This was my experience. I was there last month." And it was a really interesting and really great time to learn. And at the same time, we got to do all the fun academy things. So I do want to go through some of these pictures and just show you. So this is my older brother, Eric, who you guys have seen. And this little guy right here is now the guy who's the captain at Fort Carson when he was coming to visit. This man right here, named Adam Smoot. Adam is a Colorado guy also. He's down in Colorado Springs, former Apache pilot. And then I have my roommates and friends from our time at the academy. So while everything was going on, and while it was a confusing and interesting time, we still got to do all the great things that you get to do at the academy. So, after West Point. I went to infantry officer basic course, and I married my classmate and the love of my life, Mindy, and then we went to Fort Polk, Louisiana. So, Fort Polk, Louisiana was a great time. Not many people have the privilege of saying that. Most people rotate through the swamps for a little bit and then come back. We got to live there for 4 years and really enjoyed it with our friends and our friends down at Fort Polk. We had our first child, Emma, while we were there. She was born, a Louisiana girl born at Fort Polk. But while this was going on, my brother was in Iraq. So these are some photos of him while he's in Iraq. And I bring this up to say that this was such a family event for us. My older brother missed our wedding because he was in Baghdad at the time. And we missed so many different things, family events, things that you would take for granted because one or the other of us was deployed. One or the other of us was deployed in Iraq or Afghanistan. Then my wife Mindy, she went to Afghanistan. Now this is a very interesting story. We went to Fort Polk and we were supposed to go to Afghanistan right after I got there in late 2005. My deployment was deferred, delayed again and again. Well, at the same time, in order to be there at the same time, my wife volunteered to go to Afghanistan. So she volunteered so that we would be there together. She left and I stayed home because we kept getting delayed and my deployment kept changing. Now, we packed to leave so many times that we stopped packing. We would load up the containers, we would load up our bags and say, all right, we're leaving. Then we wouldn't go. Then we would load up our containers, we would load up our bags, we're leaving, and then we wouldn't go because things continued to change until we stopped packing. And then when we stopped packing, we keep hearing these rumors, you're gonna go. Like, no, we're not, we've been through this before. My wife's in Afghanistan, she kind of knows who's coming and going. She's not hearing anything about us going. And on a Friday, we have a battalion formation. We're all standing in front of the battalion commander, and he says, we're leaving Monday. So Walmart was packed that night as we packed up our stuff, had to go and get the essentials, the toothbrush, the toothpaste, deodorant, figure out how to close up our houses really quick. My parents came down and grabbed my dog and cat. And I said goodbye, here's how you lock up the house. And we were in Afghanistan. So when we were in Afghanistan, my unit, which was 2nd Battalion of the 30th Infantry Regiment, which was part of 10th Mountain, my battalion started off at Forward Operating Base Ghazni. Ghazni is kind of in the central part of the country, a little bit central east, former kind of historical capital. There's palaces from Genghis Khan was there, Alexander the Great went through there, and somehow I ended up there. We were at a forward operating base run by my battalion just outside of Ghazni, Afghanistan. You can see some of the pictures around Ghazni. Snow, and more snow. It was cold and it was snowy. Now we had a few different missions while we were there. And some of the things that we did were just normal patrols, routine patrols. And routine patrols are never routine. And I have a great story about the ingenuity and the control of our soldiers today. And that was, I was on a quick reaction force mission from FOB Ghazni. And we got a call that there was a hole in the road that we needed to go check out. Now, there's two significant things about that. One is, holes in the road are a bad thing, because holes in the road blow up. So you don't want to be near those. And the second thing is, there's one major road that runs through Ghazni, and that's one major road that runs through the country, and that's Highway 1. Highway 1 is the traditional Silk Road through Afghanistan, and there's a hole in the middle of this road. So we go out there to test it out, or just check it out. Block the traffic, which we were blocking during whatever Afghanistan's rush hour looks like. We're blocking the traffic on that, on our side of the hole, securing it. And we send out our little robot. We have a lot of the technology you hear and you see. We were able to utilize some of that. So we sent out a robot with a camera into it and drove it straight into the hole. So that didn't help us at all. So now we have our robot with a camera that's supposed to keep us safe in the hole that it's supposed to be checking out. So we continue to set up security. We have a truck blocking the road, trucks on each side, and I as the platoon leader, did probably one of the stupidest things that I've done, which is saying, all right, let's go check out this hole. Who wants to come? Squad leaders, of course, right? So why not me and my senior guys go check out this hole? So as we're going up there, kind of looking down at the hole, trying to find our thing, hoping that this thing doesn't blow up, because if it did, the entire platoon senior staff is gone. We would have had issues. Fortunately, it didn't. There was no bomb. We were able to retrieve our robot and go home. But while we're up there checking it out, we have a soldier who is in the turret of his truck blocking the road. This soldier had just gotten to us. He was 18 years old. He has earned the nickname Shotgun Lou. Right? So this soldier is up in the turret of his vehicle, blocking the road. And if you're an 18-year-old kid, just getting to Afghanistan, scared as can be, he reverted to the great training that he had. And what the training he had was that Humvee was his palace. No one comes near your palace. You protect that. It is your castle. No one comes near it. He also knew that he had rules of engagement that he had to abide by. So as Afghanistan rush hour is coming, people are angry because they want to go wherever they're going to go. A crowd started to form up on that Humvee. And Shotgun Lou is up there in the Humvee, scared, nervous, and a crowd is forming around him, and his entire leadership's looking in a hole for some reason. So he does what he's supposed to do. He shouts at the crowd, get back, stay away, get back. They continue to approach. So then he does what's next is he shows them his weapon. He's got a large mounted machine gun on top of the truck, which he has, but he also has a shotgun. And he has a shotgun that we use for breaching doors, and it's also good for scaring people away. So he pulls out that shotgun, and he's showing them, still saying, get back, get back, get back. The crowd still continues to come until Shotgun Lou turns the shotgun, saying, get back, get back, get back. And then people understand that. That's universal language from, I need to get away from this guy. And that could have happened a lot differently. Shotgun Lou could have reacted the way any normal 18-year-old in that situation would have acted, which is out of fear and out of a sense of protecting yourself. He is in an armored vehicle. He has a shotgun, a machine gun, and he feels threatened. And that could have ended way differently than it did. And he earned the nickname Shotgun Lou because he had that shotgun at that time. And that, I think, is a testament to the training that our soldiers receive and their ability to think on the ground. So,
Ryan,
yes, sir.
When you go out on these things, you don't have an interpreter or someone who can speak the language?
Yes, we did. We did have an interpreter. Our interpreter actually was
In the hall with
you know what? He probably was. He probably was. And our interpreter was a great guy. He's a young man who actually learned English as a bartender on the British Forces base in Kabul, which my response was, the British have bars? We're not allowed to have those. But yes, we did have an interpreter. I honestly don't remember if he was there trying to convince people to get back or if he was looking in the hole with us. He kind of liked to follow me around, so he was probably looking in the hole. Another thing with dealing with the local forces in Afghanistan was the interpreter, the language barrier we had. One of our jobs was to secure Fob Ghazni. And in order to do that at the time, there were guard towers, walls, and a couple layers of gates. So while my platoon was on guard duty, we would have an American soldier and an Afghan soldier in a tower together, Neither one speaks the other person's language, and they're watching the gate. The they're watching outside the perimeter. The Afghan soldiers guarded the first gate. American soldiers guarded the second gate. And they have a position called the Sergeant of the Guard, which would be my senior squad leader at that time, who was the Sergeant of the Guard, who was responsible for checking all the soldiers. Now, it's not Lieutenant of the Guard, so basically, I didn't have a job during this portion, so I just run around and feed guys, check on them, hang out with them at the guard while they were pulling guard. Till one night, we receive a report that there's a shooting at one of the towers. So we rush to the tower, we run inside, and lo and behold, the window's blown out. There was a shooting from the inside of the tower. And we ask our soldier what happened, as he is kind of backed in the corner like, what's going on here? You know, his weapon's at the ready. And it turns out that the Afghan soldier that he was with had shot outside. So we get an interpreter there. The interpreter lets us know that the man saw a ghost, and that there was a ghost that he had seen just outside the tower, and he was trying to shoot the ghost. Another example, though, of the restraint that our soldiers have in those situations. Here you have a soldier, scared to death, has an M4, and he was also one of our machine gunners, so he borrowed an M4 and had a 9mm pistol with him. An Afghan soldier starts shooting from inside the same room he's in at a ghost that he can't see. The soldier did a great job of not returning fire, and that having been a way different story. So once again, another great example of our soldiers. And then I have one last story about my time at FOB Ghazni before we transitioned to the next place we went to. And that is, one lesson that I learned in Afghanistan is that you can't trust anyone. And trusting folks in Afghanistan is a very, very difficult and hard thing to do. We went to an outpost called Miri. Now Miri, you can see where we lived. We had a GP medium tent, which is for about 15 guys. My entire platoon of just shy of 40 guys was in that. You can see my platoon sergeant here's trying to warm us up over a fire because it never got above 0 when we were there. My guy's cooking. Now, one thing about it great being about never above 0 is you can get food there, and you can just leave a package of meat outside and it's already frozen. So we would make a fire, there's the guys cooking over the fire. So while we were there were two groups that we worked with. One was the Afghan National Army, and the second was the Afghan National Police. The Afghan National Army did not trust the Afghan National Police. The Afghan National Police chief would not talk about what they were going to do in front of his own police officers because he did not trust them. So that was the situation in which we went into. Now, the Afghan National Army commander and I got to have a very good mutual trust working relationship. And actually, through our interpreter, we just hung out, stayed up almost all night one night, just talking, telling stories, showing each other how to assemble and disassemble our weapon systems. We couldn't speak the same language, but we both knew weapons. We both knew guns at the time. So that's how we built this rapport. This Afghan National Army commander and his soldiers, as well as myself and my soldiers, are doing a routine patrol one day. We went to the school. There's a small school in this village, probably no bigger than this room is the entire school, some books and papers on the floor, and a couple chairs. And we're meeting with the superintendent or principal headmaster of this school. I'm sitting down to meet with him. And as a young soldier, you're taught, don't disrespect the local culture. So if the local culture offers you, if someone from the local culture offers you tea, you drink the tea. So I'm sitting next to the Afghan commander, my interpreter's behind me, and the school's headmaster or principal, along with his folks, are kind of across from us as we're sitting there with no table between us. They offer us tea, and I say, yes, please, I would like to have some tea. And they handed me the tea. And before I could take a drink of the tea, the Afghan commander, all he did was very subtly kick my boot and shake his head. So I put the tea down. I couldn't speak the same language as him, and he couldn't tell me anything because we would have had to work through the interpreter. After our meeting, we left, and that commander looked at me through our interpreter and said, he was trying to poison you. Now, one of two things could happen from that. One is, he was really trying to poison me, and this man saved my life. Two is, this guy he wasn't trying to poison me, and this guy was trying to get on my good side. Either way, it worked because we were friends after that. I take the first part of it. I do believe he was trying to do something bad because just outside that school a few days later, we lost a Humvee. And the Humvee, we had hit a mine that was buried there just outside of that school. And a soldier from our sister platoon was injured very badly in that accident, just outside the same school where the same guy was supposedly working with the Taliban. Now, that same commander, who I now trust very well, brought me a man and said, this man is a member of the Taliban. This man is working with them, providing information for them, and providing money and funds to the Taliban. So I start working, doing my work, which is taking his photo, trying to get information from him, trying to do whatever I can to figure out who this guy is. And then out of nowhere, a government official shows up. And this government official trumps all of us and says, he is a friend of mine, he is not bad, let him go. So we let the man go. That very night, the Afghan commander's company was in a compound right next to us, left. He took all of his soldiers and left with no warning. So then we have the joy of figuring out, where did this guy go? Why did he leave? And he left because he felt insulted that this man that he believed was Taliban was let go. But then we have a compound that we have to go clear. So I'm with my team, my squad. I took a squad, we go to clear it. First door comes, I kick it open and go inside, look around, and my squad leader goes, well, sir, did you get that out of your system? It's like, yeah, why? He goes, okay, get back, let me do the rest. So I step back from that. But the moral that we learned there is trust is very hard to come by. And once that trust is gone, you can't get it back. So I lost a good ally that I had felt that I'd had because he could no longer trust the people around him. That he just said, I'm taking my company and I'm leaving, taking my ball and I'm going home. So from Ghazni, oh, can you hit the space bar and go to the next slide, please? I think we're having some technical issues. So from Fob Ghazni, we went to Fob Tillman. And Fob Tillman is on the eastern side of Afghanistan, right on the Pakistan border. And there we go. All right. Fob Tillman is right on the Pakistan border on the eastern side of Afghanistan. And it's named Fob Tillman because if you'll remember, the football player from the Arizona Cardinals who joined Ranger Regiment was killed. He was killed in that same area. So we're there with 2 platoons from my company, as well as our company's quarters unit, so a little less than 100 soldiers, along with some Afghan soldiers who were there. And Fob Tillman was a very, very interesting place in that the only way that we were able to get there was by helicopter. So you fly in, and you fly out, and that school bus with wings or with propellers, that was how we got in and out of there. Now there were vehicles, we did have some Humvees there. So we were able to operate out of Humvees while we were there, but to get there and to get out was by helicopter. And interestingly, when I was walking home from school the other day with my daughter, my daughter who's a 3rd grader said, wouldn't it be really cool if they delivered mail by a helicopter? And I said, you know what? I got mail by a helicopter. And it was a helicopter just like that. So of all the things that I have or have not done in my life, my daughter's most proud of me because I got mail from a helicopter one time. You can see here, these 2 pictures on the side I think are very interesting because that is how we traveled. That is a riverbed with our Humvees in it. And you can see this is the view from a Humvee down one of those riverbeds. And the water would vary in depth from just a little bit, kind of muddy to up to knee to waist deep within those riverbeds. Those were our highways. And a leadership lesson that I learned while going down those highways one time is one of these Humvees broke down. And it was the Humvee that was in front of me. And so it breaks down in the river, probably calf deep water. It's melting snow, so it's really cold. And as Colorado, we understand what those waterways are like. So I jump out with a couple of my soldiers, and we're hooking this up to a tow bar. We're hooking this broken Humvee down, or this broken down Humvee up. And my boss, my company commander, came out, grabbed me by the shoulder in this river, and you understand the danger from these rivers in the position you're in, kind of being down in this valley, and says, what are you doing? Your job is to lead this platoon and to get these guys where they need to go. If something happens to you, what is going to, how are they going to continue this mission? And he had a very valid point. And had I been the company commander at the time, and had that been one of my lieutenants, I would have said the same thing. However, I would have expected that lieutenant to have done the same thing that I did, which was showing your soldiers that you were willing to go into the same danger that they are. Was I the best one at hooking a Humvee up to a tow bar? No, I was probably pretty bad at it, actually. But showing them that I was willing to get out in the rushing cold water in a dangerous place like that was very critical because they wouldn't hesitate to do it the next time because they knew that I did it. So while we were working in these riverbeds, we had an informant come and let us know that there was a mine in the middle of one of the roads or one of the riverbeds. And this was the mine we found. It was an Italian style landmine, about the size of a big dinner plate. There's different types of detonators that these landmines have on them. This one, fortunately, was not a pressure one. This one was a command detonated, so we were able to follow the wires and see where it was. The scary thing is we drove over that same mine on our way to where the guy was. Fortunately, there was nobody on the other end with a detonator ready to set it off. This right here is an Afghan soldier, and they dug that up with bayonets. These men got around in a circle and took these big bayonets and knives and started digging. So I did the smart thing, and I got my platoon back. I said, let them dig. I'm not going to be near this thing, because there was no stopping them. They were ready to get it out. Another thing of these rivers, though, is when things do blow up, it's bad. We had a supply truck coming to us get hit with an IED. So my platoon went out to investigate the IED and to figure out what happened. Turns out that it's right next to a village. And it's right next to the same village that at a different time we found piles of cash and passports from other countries. So this was kind of a place that we knew that something bad was happening. Now, when we rolled out there with 4 Humvees, total of 20 soldiers you can fit in these Humvees, we started to clear the village. Now, I have 4 Humvees, 20 soldiers. I have to leave at least 4 soldiers, 1 person per Humvee, plus an NCO to lead them. 5 people are down. So that means 15 people are going into the village. One of those folks is me. One of those folks is my fire support NCO. One of those folks is my interpreter. And so that leaves 4 or 5 folks down. So now your 15 gets down to 11, 10, 9 shooters pretty quick. So as we're going then through this village, going door to door, before we went in, some young men ran out the back of the village up over the mountain too. So we knew again something good was not happening. So we went in there with our guard up and we start clearing houses, one after another, after another, after another.
What does that mean?
Yes, so clearing houses, that's a great question. We have to go into every building, every house, and clear it to make sure that there's not a threat. So that's you're standing outside the door, you rush in with weapons up, making sure that nothing, in case there's a threat inside of it. And then once you determine there isn't one, then you search it. Try and figure out what are the supplies that were used in order to make this IED, or is there any connection we can make to a bad guy here? So we start clearing them. Now, as we're clearing them, though, we lose soldiers along the way for one reason or another. We would find military-aged young men. So we kind of had a smaller holding area for them. You have to have some soldiers guard them. You'd find an avenue of approach that was dangerous, a place in which maybe we had limited visibility, or a place in which enemy soldiers could come. So you'd have to guard that. So then you're down to just a few folks continuing going door to door. And that was where I found myself, the first man at a door, ready to go in. And as the platoon leader, again, I probably shouldn't be the first man ready to go into this house. And I look behind me, and one of my squad leaders, the second in command with me, is the guy behind me. Staff Sergeant Johnson is right behind me. And then behind him is an Afghan soldier we'd never seen before. We don't even speak the same language. So Sergeant Johnson looked at me and said, let's do it. So we bust into this house. It's dark as can be in it because it's, as you saw from one of the earlier pictures, it's just a mud hut with a door. We bust in the house. It's dark. I take an immediate left. Sergeant Johnson takes the immediate right. And all you hear is this muddy sound underneath our boots. And our tactical lights, the bright lights came on from the front of our flashlights. And before I could realize what happened, I hear Sergeant Johnson yell, "I got the poo on me!" And inside this room was a cot, a cooking fire, and human feces everywhere. So Sergeant Johnson and I had run ourselves into a room that was full of poo. And we went from being tactical, on guard, ready to go, to our weapons are attached to us, to just tossing them down and saying, I'm out of here. And just walking out of this room. So that is how your emotions can change really quick too. I'm on guard, something's going to happen, and all of a sudden, I've got the poo on me.
So what happens when you bust in on one of them and it's women and children, and are they screaming? And I mean, does it make friends?
So they actually, a lot of times, they know we're coming. You know, we've been going through there a lot. The women and children are not seen very often. The children are, you'll see the children out, but the women are usually inside of a secluded room or held somewhere else by the men in the village. Now, when we were finishing clearing that same village, I distinctly remember being in a room inside of a compound, and on the far side of this room, I guess, was some women and children with my interpreter over there talking to them. And there's a box, and inside this box, probably, half the size of this podium, on the outside it's a lock. I'm trying to get the lock off this box to figure out what is in this. Is this the smoking gun that I'm looking for? So I take a rock and I bust the lock off of this box. And as I bust the lock off, a young kid brings me a key. And I saw the faces of that child and his family that I had just broken a lock, probably the only one they're going to ever have in their life. And I just opened up every single valuable possession that they had had. And that is necessary for us to figure out what happened, because you never know what could be hidden where. And at the same time, I had just violated the only privacy that they had had in their lives. So that is a very complex situation in which you're put in, and that's a very difficult situation to try and manage through them, trying to win the hearts and minds of these folks, tell them that you are there to help provide security, safety, whatever it is. And at the same time, I'm going to destroy probably the most valuable thing you have, the most valuable thing you own. It's very difficult. So the other part of our time at FOB Tillman, we were at,
Where is it?
it's that little arrow
Okay.
right there. We were at a thing called OP4, Observation Post 4. Now, OP4 is interesting. Here you see a soldier standing. Basically, picture the right of him is Afghanistan, to the left of him is Pakistan. So that somewhere there's the border, and that border would move daily. That border was marked by piles of rocks that were painted white, and you wake up in the morning and be like, I think those moved sometime last night. So that is OP4. Now our job at OP4 and the main purpose at FOB Tillman was to sit on this mountaintop and to keep the Taliban from coming from northern Waziristan, kind of the tribal area of Pakistan, keep them from coming from Pakistan into Afghanistan. So basically we were sitting on this super highway of bad guys trying to keep them from coming from one side to the other. We would have about 20 soldiers up there. The other ones would be on a smaller observation post way across the valley on top of these mountains. So this was our job. We lived in the bunkers. right? So the Vietnam veterans in here and could probably recognize a lot of these sandbag bunkers, us burning our waste. You always have to do that. And this is how we lived. We lived in these sandbag bunkers on a ridge of a mountain. Now, a couple interesting stories about observation post 4. One is I was sitting on what we called the bridge of the Enterprise, which was basically an open bunker with a little overhead cover right here. And this is where our radios, where we had a 50 caliber machine gun. And that was where you had the best view of kind of the area in which we were trying to watch. And that was my space. That was where I would hang out, and that's where I would work from. And I was there one morning, and I hear an explosion and see, you see a crater on kind of a mountain across from us. And so I'm starting to look, okay, what's going on here? And I see the Afghan soldiers kind of in the area too, watching and making some noise. And then they go inside of a bunker, there'd be another explosion. And inside the bunker that they were in was a rocket launcher. And I had thought that they were shooting rockets into this mountain across for some reason. So I get a call over the radio saying, we believe you're being mortared. Are you being mortared? I said, no, it's just the Afghans shooting a mountain for some reason. They're shooting the other side of the mountain. Happens a couple more times. I get another call going, I think you're being mortared. I said, no, I'm watching this happen, right? These guys are right across from a rocket, or a rocket is right across from them is where there's an explosion. And then one lands behind me. I said, uh-oh, we're being mortared. Because when they're in front of you and consistently landing there, that's okay. When you get one behind you, you know that they're figuring out, okay, where are these guys? So we had the technology there. We knew that they were shooting mortars. But my eyes and my ears saw something different. So it was really interesting trying to figure out what exactly is happening here and why is this happening. Another thing we had while we were there is we had one of those days that something was going to happen. We just knew it. Everybody was kind of on edge. And this happened a couple times when we were there. But one of those times, we had a couple helicopters show up. These Apaches, these helicopter pilots that were mentioned earlier, show up and they said, hey, can you, do you need anything? It's like, yes, please check out the backside of this ridge. We don't see we can't get guys back there. Can you check it out? So they fly back there and they say, do you have anybody here? It's like, no. We have movement in a cave. Are we clear to engage? So I was quiet, right, waiting for somebody to clear these guys to engage. And I was like, oh, wait, that's me. That's when I realized at 25 years old that I was the one who's going to clear these Apaches to engage. I said, clear to engage. So they do their work, and they leave, saying that they're going to go rearm. Before that, all they said was no more movement in the cave. And they left. And we did not have anything happen to us that night. The next day, one of my sister platoon leader went over there and he checked it out and he said, cave, can't get in it. We had another night that was very similar where we knew something bad was going to happen. Everybody's on edge. And then out of nowhere, my commander radioed me and said, 30 seconds, there's going to be an F-15 on site. I was like, what? And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this jet drops down out of the sky and comes right over our heads. It felt like you could touch this thing. So loud and slow and low right over us. And I get a call from one of my squad leaders over the radio who's kind of down the line in one of these other bunkers. And he said, hey, sir, next time there's going to be a jet fly right over our heads. Can you let us know? He's like, well, I just found out, so no, I can't. Again, that was something that we knew something was going to happen. But having that technology, having those pilots willing to drop down from 10,000 feet to 500 feet and fly right over our heads, while it scared us, having them on your side is a great thing. Now, there are times, though, that we found out that having that much technology, that much air power, can be a hindrance. And at one point, I was sitting on the bridge, in my bunker out here. It's night, it had just gotten dark, and I'm sitting there with one of my squad leaders, Staff Sergeant Pack, and we're just talking, kind of taking our turn on guard duty. And you see a flash up on top of a mountain, and then you see, 2 or 3 flashes from a flashlight. He's like, "Did you see that?" Like, "Yeah, I did too." So we pull our night vision down and we shine a laser up there. And as soon as we shine the laser up there to kind of see what's going on, it's a fireworks show all around us. And there are there are multiple, we're being engaged by multiple machine gun teams from the enemy. And immediately, right away, in this bunker right here, a bullet goes through the aperture, and our most casualty producing weapon that we have on site, which is our Mark 19, which is a machine gun for grenades, basically. It's a machine gun grenade launcher, pretty cool. The gunner of that gets shot. Now, he ended up being fine. So we lose our biggest weapon system at the time. And we're immediately just overwhelmed by the firepower that's coming at us. And my soldiers, the soldiers of 3rd Platoon, Alpha Company, 2nd Battalion, 30th Infantry Regiment, did an amazing job. Immediately started returning fire. I was on the radio and we called for some artillery fire. So if there's any former artillery or mortar folks in here, thank you so much. Because those rounds started coming in. And due to the amount of firepower that we had, we were able to hold off the enemy attack at the time. Now, what was interesting about the air power, though, is once you hear that there are soldiers in contact, those pilots come out of nowhere. And, you know, when you needed them, when you asked for their help, it's kind of hard to find it sometimes. But at that point, as soon as they heard there were soldiers in contact and that we had an injured soldier, it was like ants to a picnic. Those guys just showed up out of nowhere. Now, so we had first thing was an F-18 who was really high up. And we're trying to get him to locate us. And he said, okay, I think I found the target. I'm going to sprinkle it. He's going to laser. He's going to put a laser on what he feels the target is before he drops a bomb. And we have our night vision on. And all of a sudden, this massive laser comes down right on top of us. Like, no, wrong spot. That is not where you want to drop this bomb. In came an AC-130 Spectre gunship. And those things are really cool. It's a C-130 that they decided to take a Sawzall and cut a hole out of the side of it and put a howitzer cannon in that. Great idea. So that guy's flying around trying to help us out. And then came a medevac helicopter with his support, which was an Apache helicopter, in order to evacuate our wounded soldier. So we have an enemy attack. We have our own mortars and artillery firing that we had to then shut down because we have aircraft in the area. There's a Black Hawk on the ground taking a wounded soldier out. There's an Apache above him that is guarding, that is his escort, which when the Apache came and kind of hovered right in front of us, because you imagine we're on a mountaintop, and turned towards us, that is a scary sight. So my senior squad leader dove into the bunker, and I did the smart thing and dove in right behind him because he's been in this situation before. And then just over the radio, I hear my forward support NCO saying, not cool, dude, turn around. And then he did. So Black Hawk, Apache, above them is a AC-130 Spectre gunship, above him is an F-18. That is a lot of firepower in addition to our own mortars and artillery. The problem is, none of those, mortars, artillery, Black Hawk, Apache, Spectre gunship, or F-18 could do a single thing because they were all there. So nobody could shoot because we were stacked up and the medevac helicopter had priority, understandably. So it was a direct firefight after that. We were able to, again, as I mentioned, we were able to kind of repel the initial onset of Taliban coming towards us. And then afterwards, by the time the medevac helicopter had left, things had died down for the most part at that point. And some of the challenges that we have operating in that area at the time came to light when the Spectre gunship came over and said, hey, I have 11 men in a mortar tube. I said, okay, can you engage them? Because that would have been kind of cool to see that thing turn on its side and a howitzer shoot out the side. He said, nope, they're too far into Pakistan. So when we were operating on that border and dealing with the Pakistan military at the time, it made things incredibly difficult in what you could fire and what you couldn't fire at the time. So we're at Fob Tillman. We would rotate. We'd be out on the observation post for an hour or so. I mean, not for an hour or so, I'm sorry, for about a week to 10 days. We would rotate back, and then we would just go on missions in the area, and my sister platoon would come out. So there were 2 platoons, and that was our operation going back and forth. In the middle of the night, in late February, my commander wakes me up and says, pack your bags, we're leaving. It's like, sir, we just got here. Where are we going now? What other post are we going to go to? He said, no, we're going home because the unit's going to Iraq. So as quickly as we had gone to Afghanistan, hearing rumors of it, not really believing them, and then over a weekend deploying, we packed our stuff, and a week later, the beginning of March of 2007, I was home. So or March of 2007, I was home, and my unit was getting ready to go then back to, or go to Iraq. Now, after that, and this is probably a talk for another day, was my most rewarding and most difficult job that I've had in the military and outside of the military, and that was as a rear detachment commander, the guy who was home while his unit was fighting in Baghdad for 15 months. And that was a very trying and emotional time. So, but I did want to talk through my time in Afghanistan, some of the things that I learned while I was there and leading up to it. And I'd like to open it up now and see if anybody have any questions or comments or things you'd like to hear more of.
How effective do you think all of this was?
I think it's a very complex situation. Kind of a story that talked about the effectiveness is we went in there with a Western mindset as a platoon. So we're going to go in there and we're going to make changes. Well, what do these people need? They have no way to identify themselves. Let's get them an ID card maker. So we got them an ID card maker so they can have their own driver's licenses or whatever it is, because that's what we have. That's how we identify each other. So we do what we think is going to be a great thing, and we get them an ID card maker. They're run by one tribe. So one tribe now has this ID card maker. So now we created a haves and have-nots. Our good intentions went awry because now we have a group who have IDs because their tribe controls the ID card maker. And we created a have-not with their neighbor because they don't have these. Our initial mission, which was to, when we went in 2001, which was to eliminate a safe haven for Al-Qaeda, I think has been incredibly successful. The fact that we haven't had any other major attacks like a September 11th, Al-Qaeda's nearly almost all eliminated. They do not have a safe haven within Afghanistan was incredibly effective. The subsequent follow-on missions after that, I think history is going to tell. I think it's very interesting and very difficult and complex place in which we operate.
How did it change you overall? What you gave us a couple lessons.
Yes.
For anyone who's in charge, responsible for others. But now that you're out of the service, how has that changed the way you deal with people in your job?
So I feel like now that I personally have a very unique perspective and lens in which to look through the world. And everyone has a lens in which they see the world. Your lens, though, and everyone's lens, is the equivalent of watching a 2-hour movie, right? Through a straw, you only see 1 second of that. So what you see of that 2-hour movie through that straw is your perspective of the world, right? There's a whole lot more to the screen, and there's a whole lot more time in which you saw. I believe that my experience there widened my straw, widened my perspective of the world and how things operate, and allowed me to see a little bit more time of that. My everyday dealings with people, I believe now I have more compassion for my fellow man and woman, because I don't know what they have experienced in their life, just like folks don't know what I have experienced in my life. So I think it's helped with that. And then leadership-wise, I think also it's helped with my having led in those complex and difficult situations has allowed me to gain perspective and to gain an avenue in which, a new lens in which I can help others become better leaders, more compassionate leaders, and more able to relate to the folks in which they work with. Sir.
Ryan, on kind of two things, what you just said, you talked earlier about trust. And we read in the paper that Afghan soldiers that were serving with turned their weapons on us. How do you deal with that? I mean, if you're on a post like when you talked about the two guys there by themselves, I'd be a little afraid to turn my back to the guy.
Yes, it is. There's that trust element that's very difficult. In fact, a great example of that is my brother Micah here has one of his classmates and one of his best friends. Fortunately, he's okay. Was shot in the neck by a Afghan police officer when he was there. So it is very difficult to find and build that trust. And I think that you have the two components. A lot of times as a leader, you want to trust and then verify, right? In that situation, a lot of times you have to verify and then trust afterwards. So it is difficult. It is hard to know who you can trust, who you can trust your life with. And a part of that is just a faith. You have to have faith that that person has the same intentions as you do. And more often than not, they do.
Hey, Ryan, how would you feel about your daughter serving in Afghanistan? What advice would you give to her based on everything you've seen? Your young daughter graduates from the military academy and is serving in Afghanistan. Which one?
Yeah, which one? I've got three. I've got three daughters. So I think the advice, if that was the path that any of my children would choose, my advice would be to learn from the history, to understand fully what you're going into, to know that it is a complex environment in which women do not receive the respect in which they deserve or that they should have, and that they are going to be seen and treated differently, not only because they are an American coming into Afghanistan, but because they are a female American coming into Afghanistan. And as long as they have the information that they, and the knowledge of what they're getting into, I think that they would be fine. And then the second piece of advice I would give them is trust your fellow American soldiers that are next to you.
I want you all to know the phone call I received on September 11th, the evening of September 11th. I don't know if Ryan remembers this. The evening of September 11th, after the towers fell, Ryan called me and he said, "Dad, I'm quitting West Point." And I said, "What are you doing that for?" He said, "I'm quitting because I can join the Army." And I said, "You're already in the Army." He said, "No, I'm going to quit so I can join the Army and go fight." Do you remember the phone call? I said, "No, you're not. Your day's coming." And his day came, and as you can see, I think it was wise advice I gave him because he is a natural leader, and I saw that in him. And very proud of him and his brothers for what they have done and are doing and will do. And you know, he is a natural leader. He has a lot to offer, has offered, and he's led well. And his mother and I are very proud of
What's your opinion of bringing some armor into Afghanistan rather than a Humvee?
Where I was, armor would not be effective. You couldn't drive a tank where I was. I really can't speak to a lot of the other areas. A lot of that would be down south now, around the Kandahar area, where it's a lot more open, a lot more desert type environment. But in the eastern part of the country, up in the Kinduhush mountain range, you can't get a tank in there. So I don't think that would be as effective. However, it could be elsewhere, but I've never been there.
What about Bradley's?
Same. Humvees we would be driving alongside of a mountain, and our right side of the tires would be on the edge of the cliff, as the driver's side mirror, not just mirror and door scraping the cliffside next to it. And the gunner's the one who's actually looking, letting us, making sure we're still on the road. So Bradley's tanks, Strikers, could not operate there. However, they probably could elsewhere.
But they also tend to destroy the roads, you know, that the Afghan nationals need to just move from town to town.
Sir?
I was always struck by how wide the track of a Humvee is compared to the old style Jeep.
Yes.
Was that a problem in this terrain?
Well, the width of it did make it hard to operate in some of the mountain areas. And even in some of the towns, you would drive down a road of a town and you would be scraping houses on each side, or cars where you would hook onto a car accidentally and drag it for a little bit. However, the width of it also allowed us to operate on a lot of the different varying terrain without flipping.
Can I expand a minute and just ask what Mindy was doing in Afghanistan?
Yeah, forgive my cold. I have the worst cold right now. I was an aide de camp to a one-star general, so we had two commands in Afghanistan at the time, and one was the training command that was teaching Afghan forces, and so he was the deputy commanding general of that. And so we just traveled the whole country meeting with political leaders, literally the President Karzai, we would meet almost weekly. And he would be tribal leaders. So it was just, so what I was responsible for was working with his security on all of the travel routes, prepping him for the day, going through all the threat reports, handling all the casualty reports that would come in, and making sure they were taken care of. So I can go into a lot more detail, but a lot of travel around the country.
Mindy, do you guys agree on your opinion of Afghanistan, or are there differences between the two of you, based on your individual experiences?
I don't know, I think we agree, from what I've seen.
I think so. We had the opportunity and the luxury of seeing it from both levels, and able to then talk about that and again expand our own lenses and see what is it she's seeing from the top and what is it that I'm seeing from the ground, and how do the two relate, and what do each of those experiences look like.
Do you foresee us actually pulling out at some point?
You know, that's a crystal ball I don't have. You know, I see that there are some, some World War II Korean veterans in here. We're still there. We have a lot of Vietnam veterans here. We still have teams working in Vietnam. Still in Kuwait from 1991. So my crystal ball doesn't go out that far. But from past experience, we have left a force in nearly every country we've had a conflict in the history of our country. So a presence there in the near to mid future, I think, is pretty safe to say that there will be.
One thing I was thinking is going to be a problem for Americans is if we actually pull out and the Taliban comes back into control and they start doing what they did before. I don't know if we as a civilization could stand there and watch that.
So, as the historian in me would like to think that would not happen, because we have to remember too that there are different sects and different groups operating here, and that's what else makes it very complex. The Taliban came to power in the power struggle after the Soviet war in Afghanistan. Taliban originated around Kandahar. They were one of multiple different groups trying to come to power. They eventually came to power. They eventually won. Al-Qaeda shows up and said, "Hey guys, mind if we, set up some training camps and some schools and all that around here?" And Taliban's like, "Sure, why not? You do your thing. That's fine. Stay out of our way." Then September 11th, 2001 happened, and then all of a sudden Al-Qaeda came from being somebody who's just operating in their backyard to a major problem and a major threat to their existence. To now, I'm sure, that if the Taliban were looking at it now, and if a Al-Qaeda type organization came to them and said, hey, you mind if we set up some training camps in your backyard? They'd probably think twice about that, because they were a political entity operating within the confines of Afghanistan at the time. And international conflict was brought upon the Taliban based off the actions of Al-Qaeda, which there really wasn't a whole lot of interaction, to my understanding, between the two, besides them offering them a safe place to work. So it would be interesting. The same thing could happen. Instability could happen at any point. However, I do believe that the Taliban would think twice about letting another organization come in and play in their backyard.
Have any of you seen the Ken Burns series in Vietnam?
Yeah.
Well, the tail ending, I think, is kind of a very disturbing view in terms of what we promised the South Vietnamese. Remember back then, we promised the South Vietnamese that if they signed a peace treaty with the North, which we negotiated, they were not part of that, that if the North violated that, we would come back in with our air support and we would continue to provide them arms and support. And as soon as President Nixon was out, Congress repudiated, announced there'd be no support, cut off all support, ammunition, resupply to South Vietnamese, and the North just walked right in. I can't help but feel, the American people are tiring of this. And it doesn't look like a no-win situation. I think we came very close with the negotiations, that's my personal feeling, of selling the Afghans down the drain just to give us cover to get out. And I have a sad feeling that eventually that's probably what's going to happen. And you're going to have a large number of people, women and others who've worked with us for years and believe in kind of a democratic thing, who are going to either just be left to hang out on their own. And with our current attitudes toward allowing refugees in, you think our current government would allow a bunch of Afghans to come in? I doubt it. So, overall, I think we've yet to see how this is going to play out. But, my father served World War II and up the Cold War. My parents weren't happy to see me go to Vietnam. I saw my son go to Iraq. And now we're seeing, the next generation is going to be probably Iraq and Afghanistan and who knows where else for a long time. So, Mark.
I learned to spell quagmire in Korea.
Well,
And the print's getting bigger every time.
Korea turned out differently. I think that's what got us into Vietnam, because we thought we could create something like that. But anyway, that's maybe a topic for another day. Ryan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
For being our
Thank you.
speaker. And so here's one of our challenge poems and stuff.